A Bloodborne movie, Josh Brown. Would you like one?
Tell me more. I would, but I have a lot of conditions that need to be met.
If one of those conditions is Bill Skarsgård,
It is.
Then you might be okay. So this comes from Daniel RPK, a known leaker responsible for various things from MCU plot points to The Last of Us factions multiplayer details. A couple of years ago, let's say, now saying that Sony are looking to develop a Bloodborne movie. This is a follower from a leak from last year, and we'll get to all of it. But the new thing, or the new information, is that Sony's interested in using Adam Wingard, who did Godzilla vs. Kong, to direct the Bloodborne movie, and Bill Skarsgård would star. Last year, it's worth noting that last year, Daniel RPK also mentioned that Darren Lemke is apparently writing it, which is the dude that did Shazam, Gemini Man, and Goosebumps, and a few other things. But I have a bit more on this, but initial thoughts on Bloodborne.
Gemini Man. The writer of Gemini Man.
We don't talk about Gemini Man.
I'm not sure I like
Bloodborne
that.
Man, that's him.
The Bloodborne Man. Yeah, you can always reinvent yourself.
Jason Bourne.
Very conflicted, Scott. The fact that it's live action is exciting for me, but I honestly thought that going down the anime route would have been maybe safer and perhaps even more fitting to Bloodborne's visual style and mythos. I like Bill Skarsgård a lot. I like it when he's being creepy. I like it when he's being normal. And I like it when he's being normal creepy. I think he can do a lot. He's got a lot of range as an actor. Adam Wingard is another element of this that I'm a little bit divided on, because I've liked some Adam Wingard movies. I thought Godzilla vs. Kong was all right. I actually really liked the Blair Witch film that he did. And his earlier horror stuff, I think, would make him a good fit for the horror themes of Bloodborne. But he's, for me personally, a little bit hit and miss. And I think when Sony gets directors for these movie adaptations specifically, the writing teams and the directing teams are always, they've never really filled me with confidence. Like, I liked Uncharted, but like the writer of that movie and the director of that movie kind of makes you think, well, could you maybe have made a better film with different filmmakers? Same with Gran Turismo, which was directed by Neil Blomkamp, and it's like another hit or miss director, and it's like, Sony, what's going on? Surely you've got better connections.
I feel like Sony are second only to Warner Brothers, or maybe they're overtaking them in regards to how much studioing there is to an ongoing project. Look at the likes of Madam Web. Look how hacked to death a lot of that stuff is, to try and appease, assumedly, test audiences or various data points they've got out there. Well, if we just put this plot point, edit the scene this way or whatever. I'm probably oversimplifying it. However, when you look at the final products, it looks exactly like that, where things are just sliced to ribbons. Like you said, Uncharted, I didn't mind at all. That final pirate ship and flying set piece is pure Uncharted DNA. There's some good stuff in there. I haven't seen Gran Turismo yet, but I did want to say that all of this feels like that's why we haven't got the Bloodborne update yet, a 60 FPS patch or a remaster or a remake or whatever. I think Sony have this overall new mandate going on, and we have a couple of things to point to where they want to have a movie or a TV show alongside the remake. Like you had it with The Last of Us, the HBO show, then you got Last of Us Part 1 getting remade. They remastered Last of Us Part 2 as well, because you might as well, considering how big that show went. And the smoke and gun is Until Dawn. We finally got a look at the Until Dawn remake, and we know there's an Until Dawn movie coming out, and I think that's their whole thing. Sony PlayStation Productions, or whatever the hell they call their new studio, that whole mandate seems to be double-pronged thing.
Surely you cannot do a Bloodborne movie without doing the remake,
That's what I'm saying.
I think, gamers across the globe would revolt, because it's clear if you're doing a movie adaptation that you have faith in the IP, that you enjoy the IP and think it's popular enough to make money, but you've been ignoring Bloodborne as a gaming franchise for nearly 10 years, man.
The thing
it came out in
is,
2015.
Yeah, and shout out to Nextlander, because they were talking about this as well, the Nextlander podcast. The idea of, like if Sony needs to make more money right now, the idea of even if you just put a 60 FPS patch on Bloodborne and then release it on PC or whatever it is, if you need to charge for it, whatever, I don't want them to do that. But in an era where we have, Sony's interim president, Hiroki Totoki, talking about they need to be better with their money, their finances, and how much games are taken to develop, how long they take, etc. This is such an open goal, easy win. It has been for 9 years now. But for the love of God, just give us at least a frame rate update. They have to do the bare minimum alongside the movie. I mean, the thing that throws all this off is that you might not even get the movie for another 2 years or something like that. And then, we're assumedly closer to the PS6 or whatever it is. But still, I would assume that this is why. I think you also had Hiroki Totoki talking about they don't have any major exclusives until March next year. That whole thing about how they want to set back, they want to focus on their live service stuff. Helldivers is doing numbers. I think, whilst they figure out exactly what kind of company they want to be with their old president, Jim Ryan, stepping down, the likes of going forward with movie TV / other media with a new version of a game, that's a thing that should stay.
It is. And the only thing I worry about is whether they're, like you said, in terms of the big studios, they are genuinely second only to Warner Brothers when it comes to just mishandling their movie portfolio. I think they're doing a better job at TV, just looking at something like The Last of Us, which, if you like that show or not, did very well from a commercial standpoint and a critical standpoint. But like the movies, like you said, Uncharted, pretty good. Gran Turismo kind of came and went. I think they need to be better. And when I look at Bloodborne, and I want to throw this question over to you and the comments, and whoever wants to get in touch on social media, what do you even want a Bloodborne movie to be? Because personally, I think if you're spending more than $50 million on it, you're kind of setting yourself up for a fall. Like I'd want to focus on the horror. I want it to be nasty. I want it to be bloody. I want it to have some action in it. But I don't know how you do it. I don't know what scale of production this is, because Gran Turismo was a pretty big scale movie, not like the biggest, but pretty big. Uncharted, obviously $100 million plus. Where will this fall?
Well, the thing is, do you do a new Hunter story? Are you someone who's arriving in Yharnam and you get the whole, you do the audience surrogate thing where you find that you arrive in Yharnam, it's a ghost town, you're going for some reason or whatever it is, and no one's there anymore, and then you find out about all the blood curse and all that kind of stuff, and you're exploring the streets from there. That feels like a Sony way to do it.
Yeah.
However, I would rather they did something like the Father Gascoigne story or whatever, where you've got a character and you've got a little plot twist kind of in there. You've got some pre-baked sort of twists, like I said, to pull from, and an established character that has a look and things like that. But yeah, the combat side of it's interesting, because can you do a Soulsian adaptation without some sort of giant boss fight? Does it need that? Can you do a character-driven one? Can you do an atmospheric-driven one? How much does that affect the budget? Can you Blumhouse it where you have a specific cap and you spend that however you want?
Yeah.
I wonder what people want from a Bloodborne movie.
Me too.
My gut says atmosphere over bosses, but I don't know. You could maybe do a bit of both.
That might be, that's the thing, right? I know what I think. Well, I think I know what I want from a Bloodborne movie, but is that what the general audience would want? Because, like you said, the bosses, the combat, it's such a big part of that game, obviously, and you would need a huge budget if you want to bring the eldritch horror part of that game to life. Like when that game shifts into more cosmic horror, that's a scale that will be ridiculous for a movie, and you will need $100 million plus, presumably, to bring to life in the same way that the game does it, because you're suddenly dealing with these huge monsters on this massive scale and inside these already huge cities. So yeah,
I wasn't even thinking about how to, because I was just thinking that was impossible to do. That whole review, and I guess spoilers, I guess, for Bloodborne, it is 9 years old, but towards the back third of that game, when you start seeing things differently, let's say, and you see these big, like you said, Lovecraftian horrors, that have always been watching you just couldn't see them or whatever, and certain bosses that are a lot more spectral in nature, that suddenly cranks up the budget. And I mean, even if you went on practical effects, there's no real way to do that and do it Blumhouse style. They've never done anything that big. I'm only comparing to Blumhouse because they're known for having restricted budgets and making things work, but that also restricts locations and stuff like that.
That's it, man. It's do you scale it back and kind of focus on the first half of Bloodborne, do the more Bram Stoker inspired, werewolves and smaller village, I was going to say, what would you even describe them as? Villager horrors, when they're infected, but they're humanoid is what I'm looking for.
I don't know if you saw, just to throw it in, I don't know if you saw Brotherhood of the Wolf, but
I haven't, but I know that
gets cited a lot.
Yeah.
Just because the costumes look very, very similar. If you've seen that movie, it's not really close to Bloodborne in terms of the story, but the look of it, you could be like that.
I think they've got the look down, right? I think whether they go the cosmic horror, whether they go the Bram Stoker horror route, the look of Bloodborne is perfect to bring to life in a movie space. It just is, what story are you going to tell? And what story are you going to tell within a movie? Because that gives you, let's say, 2 hours to tell this narrative. And Bloodborne's lore is so rich that I do you tell the story of old Yharnam and that, the initial beast scourge that sort of happened there, and then the entire thing was bombed, essentially, all burnt down, and then we built Yharnam on top of it. Do we start there, or do we start in Yharnam, and then we discover that as we go? To me, I look at this, and I think this would make an excellent television show. A high-budget TV show where you get 10 episodes and you get really into the lore. You follow one character going through this nightmare, starting quite humbly, fighting a few werewolves and getting to the end where you're fighting the moon presence itself coming down.
That's the thing, yeah, how far do you do the spectral stuff? I think, like I said, the whole audience surrogate character thing, I think there's a hybrid of the two where you could almost do like the Castlevania anime on Netflix, where Trevor Belmont is like an established member of the Belmont clan. He can fight really well, but he's also he's discovering what he's getting himself into in real time kind of thing. I mean, just assumedly not Tom Holland or Chris Pratt.
Hey, you never know.
They're in the Jack and Daxter movie, so apparently there's that.
Hey, man, Bill Skarsgård could play like the creepy little From Software character. And then you could have Tom Holland, you could have The Rock, and you could have Chris Pratt in there.
Kevin Hart's the slug.
There you go.
Kevin Hart's the little slug.
Amazing.